No risk it, no biscuit.
Coming from the Arizona desert, presented by SBNation.com. For Arizona Cardinals fans, by Arizona Cardinals fans, with outsider and insider's perspectives, this is Revenge of the Birds. Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans. This is Revenge of the Birds Radio. This is your host, Jess, and we are here for another episode of our weekly Tuesday night show, in which we talk about the previous game that the Arizona Cardinals played. Now, it's an interesting tonight as it being Tuesday night. Thank you for those of you who are listening live, and if you're listening via download, then what it feels like is a little bit different because the Cardinals didn't play on Sunday night. They played last Thursday, so it seems, like it's been a week already, because it almost has. The Arizona Cardinals took on the St. Louis Rams in St. Louis on Thursday Night Football, a game in which many people believed that the Rams would run away with, actually, based on the way they've been playing and the physical nature of their game, the short week, and all the injuries that the Arizona Cardinals have had. But somehow they stepped up, but not without a cost. The Cardinals get the win, 12-6. No touchdowns, just a bunch of Chandler Catanzaro field goals. He had 4 field goals to Greg Zuerlein's 2 field goals, and the Cardinals improved to 11-3 on the season, matching the franchise record for wins in this season. The team all but clinched a playoff spot on Thursday night. They did need a little bit of help. On Sunday, the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles simply had to have somebody win. Had they ended in a tie, well, the Cardinals would not have clinched. However, the Dallas Cowboys did come away with a victory, meaning Arizona is in the postseason. Your Arizona Cardinals, 2 years removed from just an embarrassment of a season where they lost 11 of their final 12 games, are now in the postseason in year 2 of Bruce Arians' leadership and Steve Keim's leadership. Kind of run down what happened. The Cardinals, they got the win. Their defense was dominant. They stopped pretty much everything. They forced, I think it was like 5 straight 3-and-outs in the second half. They were dominant. Unfortunately, there was a significant loss that came out of that game, and that was quarterback Drew Stanton, who, in the only time he was sacked in the game, injured his knee, and significantly, it appeared, he had to be carted off into the locker room. The initial reports were there was more sadness. There was more sadness than pain that he was feeling, which is never good news. And then after an MRI on Friday, we learned that he had suffered a sprained ACL and a grade 2 sprain of his MCL, again, which is an injury that we should be familiar with as Cardinals fans, as both Calais Campbell and Larry Fitzgerald both suffered the same type of injury. So Drew Stanton is out for the near future. The timetable is not really set. It could be a week and a half. It could be all the way up to 4 weeks. And the Cardinals had to turn to Ryan Lindley. At the time they were leading, he was able to, after the sack, he was able to lead them to a couple of plays down the field and get in the field goal range. And Catanzaro nailed it to give them the final points that they had for the game. And that was it. However, they now face the Seattle Seahawks at home on Sunday Night Football in Week 16. And they do so without Drew Stanton. They're already without Andre Ellington. They're already without John Abraham and Darnell Dockett and Darrell Washington and Carlos Dansby, who left. It's been an interesting ride. And the Cardinals made a couple of roster moves. And as of today, Ed Stinson, defensive lineman, was placed on injured reserve. He had a pretty good rookie campaign, stepping in when when Calais Campbell went down, when Matt Shaughnessy went down, and he got more playing time. Then he injured a toe, battled back from that, played a couple of snaps this last week, and apparently had a setback. And the Cardinals placed him on injured reserve, ending his season, and promoted receiver Britton Golden from the practice squad to replace Golden on the practice squad. They re-signed Zach Bauman, the running back out of Chandler, out of Hamilton High School and Northern Arizona University. Revenge of the Birds Radio is brought to you by Audible.com, the internet's leading provider of audio content. And you can get a free audiobook download. That is a free audiobook download and trial of the service. Absolutely no cost to you at all for 1 month. Test it out. Going to Audible.com. Take a look at it. And then but the URL, if you want to get that free audiobook download. This is for Revenge of the Birds Radio's listeners. Go to audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds. Again, audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds. And take advantage of that free audiobook download. Use it for the next trip you're doing, or if you just want to, during the holiday season, sit down and curl up and put some earphones in when there's all the madness is going on, just to keep some sanity. Enjoy yourself, some quiet moments listening to somebody read to you, just like when you were a little kid. Again, audibletrial.com/Revenge of the Birds. We got you good show tonight. Seth Cox will be joining. He's actually on the line. I have him on mute right now. I'm going to bring him on in just a moment. Seth Cox joins me as he does every week. And we're going to talk a little bit about the game that happened last week, but that's well into the past, it seems now. So we're going to focus looking ahead to the Seattle Seahawks this weekend. And that is a big, big game. Huge, because it's kind of a win and you're in, or the Cardinals have put themselves in a good spot. The Packers, the Green Bay Packers, who they were kind of neck and neck with in terms of the number one seed. The Buffalo Bills did a good job and knocked off the Packers by a score of I don't remember the score now, but it was a really dominant performance by the Buffalo defense, and it made it so the Cardinals can clinch two things this weekend if they beat the Seattle Seahawks. They can clinch not only the NFC West title, but also lock up the number one seed in the NFC. Giving them home field, giving them a first-round bye, then the home field advantage in the divisional round, and then should they move on to the NFC Championship game, they would play that at University of Phoenix Stadium, and it would set them up in a situation where, should they continue to move on, they will never have to travel again the rest of the season or the postseason. They would simply keep playing at University of Phoenix Stadium. They will do so this weekend, however, without Carson Palmer, without Drew Stanton, and they will do so with Ryan Lindley. Yes, that same Ryan Lindley who is a big part of that dumpster fire of 2012. Ryan Lindley will get the start this weekend. So let's bring Seth on. Let me bring Seth on, and thanks for coming on as you do every week, Seth. How are you tonight?
Good, Jess. How are you?
Doing great. Doesn't it seem like forever ago that the Cardinals played? I know that it's just a couple of days removed, and it just didn't seem feasible to do with this past weekend, with everything going on around the holidays, to have a Friday or a Saturday night podcast. So at this point, it kind of feels like it was an eternity ago, does it not?
Oh yeah, it was a long time ago, and I think the injury and just the continued injury bug to the Cardinals has made kind of everything that they've done an afterthought, because now it just seems reserved to all the experts that this team loses this week, loses in San Francisco, and then loses in the first round of the playoffs, because they can't survive with Ryan Lindley at quarterback.
and yeah, the Cardinals have put themselves in a situation. I mean, there's really not a lot of uncertainty. They're in the playoffs. They're the only NFC team to have clinched a postseason berth. They will either be the number one seed, or they will be the number 5 and top wild card, which isn't all bad, because the way that's set up, they would have to go play the NFC South champion, whether that be the Falcons, the Panthers, or the Saints. But that win was certainly bittersweet, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, about the nature of the season in general. But we're gonna look back at the game. What was the good? What was the bad from that Rams game? And then we're gonna look ahead as well. We're gonna look ahead to the matchup between the Cardinals and the Seahawks. We're gonna go over why they can win, why they can't win. We're gonna talk about specifically about the running game that has emerged, the injuries. We're gonna talk about Ryan Lindley, the chance he gives it. Why Lindley over Thomas? We're gonna talk about the defense. How important is home field going to be? Is this, in fact, the biggest matchup at biggest regular season game the Arizona Cardinals have ever played? And, well, then talk about if they end up losing in the first round of the playoffs, or if they end up, even if they end up with home field, and are they one and done, or if they end up the wild card and lose in the first round, will the season have been a waste? So that's the things we're going to be talking about over the course of the rest of the show, the next hour or so. Hopefully the show doesn't run too long. I know that the podcast tends to get a bit lengthy at times. We appreciate everyone who does listen. And if by chance you happen to be listening live, and you'd like to call in and make a comment about the Arizona Cardinals and their matchup this weekend or the previous weekend, or kind of talk about just the whole injury situation, give us a call at 646-478-3787. It's 646-478-3787. This is Jess Root with Seth Cox on Revenge of the Birds Radio. So tell me, Seth, let's go ahead and rain on the parade early. Let's get the stuff out. The bad. What stood out to you as the part that you really came away from the game not confident? I mean, as this is as impressive a win, even though the game itself wasn't pretty. You look at the way they won and who they were playing, considering the Rams have some impressive victories this year. They beat the Seahawks, they beat the 49ers, they beat the Broncos, but they weren't able to beat the Cardinals in either time. So they swept the Cardinals swept the Rams. Were there any part of the game where you left just a little disappointed or disheartened?
I think you were disappointed, and this is before Stanton even was hurt. I think you were disappointed in the offensive performance as a whole. They had the turnover early the Cardinals forced a turnover early, and, got a chance early to put points on the board and end that Rams shutout streak, and they did. I mean, they got a field goal, but it just seemed like all game long that this Cardinals offense couldn't get going. And, we've talked about it before. The Rams defense is probably the second best defense they'll play the rest of the season. The problem is the first best defense they'll play, they play this Sunday. So it's disheartening that even with Drew Stanton at quarterback, they couldn't get anything going. There was no rhythm to the offense. You and I were, texting a little bit during the game, and there was large swaths of the game where I was just wondering where Kerwin Williams was. Why was he not on the field as much? I understand, we talked about it on Twitter a little bit that, Arians said he wants to run the kind of split back scenario, but Williams is just so much more dynamic than Stephon Taylor. And he wasn't on the field a lot in the first half, and that was not concerning. It was just odd. And then obviously the injury and the Ryan Lindley call wasn't surprising. I think coming into that situation, you'd rather have Lindley than Logan Thomas, because we saw what Logan Thomas did in that situation in Denver. And so you have Lindley come in and you leave Thomas out and allow him to, get ready for Seattle. And now it comes out that Lindley's starting, so it doesn't really matter. But, it's just one of those things where I just was disheartened with the offensive performance overall, not even, with Lindley in there, but when Stanton was in there, and their inability to, again, capitalize on short field, make plays when they needed to. if you're going to be a team that relies on your defense to win games, which the Cardinals have been all season, then your offense needs to be able to take advantage of those short fields because, even in the St. Louis game, there were big plays by St. Louis that were made that the defense, made up for and didn't allow them to score a touchdown. But on the flip side, we saw in Seattle where the defense was playing out of their minds as well, that, they can allow a big play or two, and that can really change the complexion of the game when the offense cannot throw a counter punch or, even better, a knockout punch of their own at any time.
I had a hard time having a whole bunch of I didn't feel there were terribly many negatives for me. And that was kind of the I guess it's because of the expectation going in. Heading into this week now, and in preseason picks, yes, I had the Cardinals sweeping the Rams. But the way the Rams ended up playing over the last several weeks, they looked really impressive. And then they went 83 and ended up being like 86 unanswered points over the course of like nine quarters. But they did do it against a couple of bad teams in the Redskins and the Raiders, and the two defensive teams they're not great defensively. But I still thought that the physical nature, there was so much going against the Cardinals. I was not expecting much from Arizona. So when they were able to, when offensively they weren't able to do anything, I wasn't disappointed because that's kind of what I expected. For me, really the only negative for me that left that game, yes, you would have liked to have seen the offense score a touchdown, maybe two. But, I mean, it's been par for the course when it comes to the Cardinals on the road. The win they got in New York was thanks to Ted Ginn, of all people. They did not play well offensively. They got good defensive play. They had a lucky lost fumble on no contact, and then they got the punt return. They haven't played well on the road. They've played well enough, but they haven't played well by any stretch of the imagination. So I didn't leave with a whole lot of negatives other than the big one, and that was just the loss of Drew Stanton. And it ended up not being the season-ending loss, but it might be. We don't actually know that. It just kind of took the sail out of every single victory. And I'm going to talk about this more later because my initial impression is, what is it about the football gods that hate the Cardinals? Because the Cardinals have sucked for so long, for so much time. I've been following the team since 1989, listening to games on the radio, watching games on TV, paying attention to the newspaper. They've been terrible over the years. And then the year when they have actually the talent on the roster to actually make some noise in the playoffs, not only do they lose their starting quarterback, they lose their backup quarterback. And it's a bittersweet victory because if you're going to get to the postseason, if you kind of have this lightning in a bottle that you have, you want it to count because it doesn't come around that often. And it almost feels like a waste. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. We may or may not. I mean, I might have just said my thing there. But I didn't have a lot of negatives other than the injury. The injury was crushing. And I'm more than anything, I was impressed that they didn't fall apart. Let's kind of turn it around. The positive side. What did you come away with? What are the positives out of the game for you?
I think you start automatically with the defense and just another performance that, they've had two games where you've been let down, and both those games were on the road against teams with elite receiving talent. And that, obviously Denver and Atlanta are the games we're talking about. But you saw again, when they're up against lesser talent, and that's not to take away anything, from what they did, but when they're up against lesser passing talent, they really don't worry about it at all. It's fun to watch what Todd Bowles does because he plays the corners and his secondary the same way against elite talent and against, Rams receiving talent. And you see why when they play a team like the Rams or even the week before the Chiefs, that Bowles doesn't worry about his secondary. He lets them do their thing because he's so busy scheming with what's going on in the box to shut down the run and to get, to manufacture pressure on the quarterback. And I think, again, we saw, that's kind of what this team is. You put them up against, outside of maybe Seattle, you put them up against a team that has elite receiving talent, they may struggle. But you put them up against a team that can't win consistently outside, and the Cardinals, no matter who it is, you have to like their chances. And that's why they were in the game in Seattle. I know the score doesn't dictate that, but that's why they were in that game in Seattle, because Seattle doesn't have elite receiving talent. So they're able to do a lot of things and shut down a lot of what Seattle wants to do offensively, because they don't have to worry about, Peterson and Cromartie getting burned for whatever the amount of yards. It's almost like 1,000 yards in those two games that they got beat for, and the rest of the season it's not very bad. So you just look at that, and I think that's where you start with your the positives. And then I think Chandler Catanzaro and coming back strong. I know that there were some questions during the game about his kickoffs, but I think for the most part, the important part, he put the ball through the uprights, and that 12 points obviously was the key to the game.
Yes, I mean, with Catanzaro, the kickoffs, I'm less concerned about that, but it is getting late in the season, and realize this is a rookie who was playing in college last year, so he's playing later and longer into a season than he's ever done before. Jay Feely had the same issue last year. It's late in the season when his kickoff started getting shorter and shorter, in part because of his conditioning, because he'd had an injury over the offseason, so he wasn't able to train. So his conditioning or his leg strength gradually degraded. But to see Catanzaro bounce back, especially after clanging a couple of kicks the week before, it was really good to see. And I think he's kind of got his mojo back that he had in training camp in the preseason and early in the season when he went on a roll. He's got that confidence back, and it's big. The biggest positive for me outside of the defense, because, you really can't say enough about the defense, but because they play so well, it's easy to take it for granted. They were great. They were really, really great. And like you were saying, it's that it's going to take the most elite quarterbacks with elite receiving talent to be able to do anything against them. And we've seen, the two games that they really got shredded, Denver and Atlanta, were kind of the epitome of how you can beat the Cardinals. And again, both those games were on the road. But I was really pleased with the running game and with the production that they got. I don't think, as much as people say, "Oh, let's get Stephon Taylor out of there," he played well. The numbers were good. So it's hard to complain. It's difficult to just look at it and say Gary Arians is doing it wrong. And granted, let's look with the final numbers. Kern Williams had 15 carries for 75 yards. Stephon Taylor 14 for 61. And in the end, they rushed the ball 33 times for 143 yards. That was, for me, super impressive. That St. Louis run defense had been dominant over the last 5 weeks. It was kind of one of the keys, of the game, one of the matchups that matter. I had written a piece about that Sunday morning over the matchups that matter for that game, things to look for. And it was a running game, because St. Louis wasn't good at all against the run early on in the season. Then they went on a run. The previous 4 games, they gave 28. So there was 4 out of 5 games was under 100 yards. And was it a fluke? I don't know. But the Cardinals, whose running game has been atrocious all year, busted out 143 yards, averaged almost 4.5 yards a carry. You got big runs from both Williams and Taylor. And, you know, you're suddenly looking at a team where you're like, wait. Kerwin Williams is the answer the entire time. They're doing things offensively that they haven't been able to do. Stanton's numbers weren't impressive at all. Ryan Lindley less so. But it's really hard to gauge because the games that Stanton has struggled, they're some of the top defenses. I mean, you're looking at St. Louis defense and physicality. You look at the defense he played against when he was on the road. I mean, Denver he struggled at. Denver has one of the best defenses. He struggled against Detroit. Detroit has great defense. I mean, you look at now. It's the one thing you can look at is Atlanta. Atlanta's defense isn't any good, but it was on the road. So positives for me. Getting back to the point, the running game was a huge positive for me. The defense was a huge positive, and just the resiliency. And I talked about earlier when Drew Stanton went down. When he went down and again Denver, they fell apart because they weren't able to do anything. Now, it was late enough in the game that they already had a lead. They weren't trying to play catch up. Against Denver, when Stanton left the game with a concussion, things fell apart, but on both sides of the ball. And that was in part because Calais Campbell was out too, but things fell apart. And it didn't against St. Louis. And it had one of the feel of one of those games because they are having troubles offensively that you felt, oh no, that there'll be one big play that happens and it'll kind of ruin everything. And it didn't. And Lindley had the one big completion that got them into field goal range that got them the next field goal to kind of put them up. He got those 12 points. And when you're up 12-3, it felt at that point just the lead was insurmountable. And it turned out to be so.
Yeah,
I took a lot of positives out that because even though the results offensively, the fact they were able to run the ball was a big positive.
Yeah, and I think the more than Kerwin Williams, and this isn't a shot at anybody, but I think the subtraction of Paul Faneca has made a huge difference because as bad as Ted Larson was at left guard, he was being asked to do things he's not like best at. I don't want to say not capable of because he's in the NFL, so he's clearly capable, but he's just not best suited for. And putting him at right guard and getting him out of, asking him to pull a lot and to reach and do things like that from that left guard position, well, now all of a sudden he's been quietly the best offensive lineman in the last two games. And he's gone up against some really good defensive tackles. So, it's a good combination where you have Jonathan Cooper, who's still playing like his hair is on fire a lot of the time, and he's definitely missing assignments and probably missing line calls and things like that. But he's athletic enough to make up for it. Whereas you had a similar situation with, at least it seemed like with Faneca, but he just didn't have that ability to make up for the mental errors as he was making them. And maybe he was just so injured that that's kind of what it looked like. But, he didn't have that athletic ability to make the plays or to at least get in the way in a positive way. And then you combine that with Kerwin Williams and his ability to follow his blocks. He runs the ball where it's supposed to be run, and we saw that on the play where I think he gained like 7 or 8 yards the first time, and then Massey missed the guy on the same zone stretch outside, and Massey missed the call and didn't block anybody, and he just ran to the same spot and got tackled for like a 1 or 2 yard loss, and that's Kerwin Williams. He's going to follow his blocks, and if the blocks are there, he'll find the hole and he'll make a play. Whereas Andre Ellington was really trying to bounce everything and wasn't comfortable making those runs inside, probably partially because he was getting, beat up every time he touched the ball. But I think you have to be happy with the positives. And we've talked about Stephon Taylor before. He's like Kerwin Williams. He just doesn't have the special burst that Kerwin Williams has in the hole. So, a gain of of 6 yards for Taylor's probably a gain of 15 yards for most other backs. But that's not a bad thing. I mean, he's reliable. He doesn't fumble, knock on wood, and he's good in pass protection, and he's a good receiver out of the backfield. Kerwin Williams is, well, he was at Utah State. He hasn't shown it yet in the NFL, so that'll be interesting to kind of watch going forward, because I feel like they want to get him the ball in space, kind of like they did Ellington, but he hasn't shown that quite yet, because he has the ability. At least he did it at Utah State, but we'll see if that continues to show up or not.
And I want to talk a little bit more about the running game in a bit, but that's going to be related to the Seattle game coming up. Anything else good or bad that you want to focus on? Obviously, there's continuing to see. One thing that was interesting to see was, and I didn't notice this till afterwards, is Justin Bethel got a lot of play, and it was interesting that they went with a lot of 7 defensive backs in that game when they literally only had that many defensive backs. They were using them all. Instead of having the first set, what they usually did, their nickel dime, their big nickel, their dime, whatever, the dollar package, however you would call it. Then they pulled another linebacker. Actually, they pulled a defensive lineman instead and went with Campbell and Kelly, or Campbell and Rucker, have Shaughnessy on one side, not Shaughnessy, but with Foote and Okafor. And then instead of someone fifth up there, they brought Justin Bethel on. And I wonder if that's something we're going to see anymore. But they used 7 defensive backs for 21 plays. And it wasn't, I thought that maybe Cromartie would get a few snaps off. I was incorrect in that assumption, just like I thought that, Larry Fitzgerald will get a few less snaps. Nope, that wasn't the case. Bethel got a lot of playing time, and it was interesting to see that because they don't have a real big aerial attack. But yeah, that was kind of an interesting thing that I noted as well.
I think the other positives from the game were that the defense, again, you can't say enough about it. The way that they really just took the will out of St. Louis in the first half. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but St. Louis's offense kind of looked defeated, and at walking into halftime, like, man, we can't do anything. Like, there's no breaking these guys down. So I thought that was good. And then the other positive, and this is on the Arians front, I like the fact that when Ryan Lindley came in, his job was to hand the ball off. And the other team knew that was going to happen, and the Cardinals still won. I mean, they still won at the line of scrimmage. And like you said, that's a great defensive line. Those are good linebackers. I mean, they're probably slightly above average, and the Cardinals still won. So I think that was big, because I think, as we head into the Seattle talk, I think proving that you can run even when the other team knows you're going to run the ball, hopefully that kind of carries over to this week, because the less you ask Ryan Lindley to throw the ball around, I think the better chance you have at winning. When if you're going to ask Ryan Lindley to throw the ball 35 times in a game, much like Drew Stanton, in a way, I think you're asking for trouble.
Well, let's talk about the game. We'll put the Rams game to bed. Cardinals are in the playoffs. But then we have this game. Can you think of? I'm going to jump the topic a little bit. I'm going to move this topic up. Has there ever been a bigger regular season game that the Cardinals have played since coming to Arizona than the one they have this weekend? I don't think, without a doubt, I look at this game and say, there's no question. There's no question this is the biggest game Arizona Cardinals fans have ever seen in the regular season. You can make an argument. You can make an argument that the last week in 1998, where they had to win to get into the playoffs, Sun Devil Stadium was rocking. It was There was cardiac cards at their finest over the last 3 weeks, where they're getting game-winning kick after game-winning kick after game-winning kick. But to me, and I was around then, I was alive then. I remember that. I remember that season quite well. But this game feels bigger than any other game I've ever experienced. And correct me, would you say that this is the biggest game the Cardinals have ever played in the regular season?
I don't know. I was at that 98 game. We had season tickets then. And my dad and I were at that game. And I just remember the fact that it was for the playoffs, and then it ended up being the first time as the, then I think they're still the Phoenix Cardinals, but, the Arizona Cardinals made the playoffs in Arizona. That was a big deal. And I think the hype about this upcoming game is more the idea of this is the Cardinals' chance to slay the dragon and dethrone the champion. And because then, they win the division, they get that number one overall seed locked up, and then, you basically just put every player in bubble wrap in week 17 and hope that they make it, because the way the injury bug has hit this team, they'll probably have 3 guys get injured between week 16 if they won and game 1 of the playoffs and week 2 of the playoffs. So, I don't know. I think it's hyping it up to be the biggest game because of just how the Seahawks have become kind of the Dallas Cowboys of the 90s for this Cardinals team. Their fans come to the stadium. Their fans are annoying. I went to the Seattle game, Russell Wilson's first game, and that place was packed with Seattle fans. Kevin Cobb, coming on and leading the team to victory, baby. But I think the fact that it's the chance to really knock off the team that's been Big Brother the last 3 years to the Cardinals, and because the 49ers are down already. I mean, they're out already. So this is for all the NFC West marbles, and this is the chance for, I think it's big because it legitimizes everything that's happened up until this point for the Cardinals this season. So getting to 12-3 and locking in the number 1 seed in the NFC, it legitimizes what this team has done this year. Whereas in 98, you were just scratching and clawing to get into the playoffs. And I think that's where the difference is that was just an opportunity to get in, where this is a chance to legitimize what has been, like you said, the best regular season in Arizona Cardinals history. And, you'd have to go back a long way for a better season in just Cardinals history in general.
And I kind of feel like this is different. One, because of the significance, because they've been atop the division all year. They've suffered the injuries, and then now Seattle is playing at that championship. It's big because you don't want to see the season sort of, I don't know. I kind of mentioned before, you don't want to have it to turn into sort of kind of a waste where we end up with just a wild card team.
Well, yeah, and I think
it's not to diminish that 1998 season because it was the first time, but because it was the first time, it was big because of that. Well, we've now got a grown-up Cardinals team we've turned the franchise around in this 2 years from just an abysmal dumpster fire, losing 11 of 12 to end that season, where basically you had some promise early on and it's turned into just a dumpster fire. Now they're no longer these, the snot-nosed brats on the corner that no one expects anything from. Now they've graduated to legitimate talent, and it's against the Seahawks. So yeah, that's part of it's the hype. But it also, I think, it's also looking at the significance of the situation right now, the injuries they suffered. Home is necessary, and it makes it that much more important, at least in my eyes. So let's look at that game. Let's look at that game. It seems obviously Vegas has no faith in the Cardinals. They open it at -7 for Seattle, so a touchdown favorite on the road. It's now gone to -8, and that's it's not necessarily about the winning or losing. It's about betting. So they want betting money coming on both sides, and so they had to set the line way over the other side because honestly, if you were placing way, you ever bet on the Cardinals with Ryan Lindley at quarterback against the defending champs? I don't think so. So you have to put the line way over there to kind of sway some of those bettors, those gamblers to do that. But let's look at the game. Ryan Lindley and the Cardinals against the Seahawks. Let's make a case. Cardinals can win. Why they can't win. Let's look at why they can't win to start with. And again, this is Arizona Cardinals. Bench the Birds rated the Seth Cox. I'm Jess. We're talking Arizona Cardinals football. We're talking about the matchup, the big Week 16 matchup the Cardinals have this weekend against the Seahawks at University of Phoenix Stadium. The whole nation will be watching. It'll be Sunday night football with the Cardinals with a chance, with a victory, would not only the Seattle Seahawks, a team that has kind of owned the division now for the last little while, will win the division title at home. They will also lock up the top seed in the NFC, making it so that they would never have to leave University of Phoenix Stadium the rest after this season, including the Super Bowl, since it is being played in Glendale. Obviously, the reasons why the Cardinals can't beat Seattle are easy. One, Ryan Lindley stinks, right? He stinks. Look at his 2012. The guy still has yet. This is the third year in the league. He's yet to throw a touchdown pass. 7 interceptions. Almost had an interception. And interestingly enough, against the Rams, Janoris Jenkins, and I kind of made tried to make it a funny tweet about how Janoris Jenkins happens to be Ryan Lindley's favorite receiver. After all, Ryan Lindley has thrown a pair of touchdowns in the league. They're both Janoris Jenkins for the Rams, as he returned a couple of pick sixes. And just a few minutes after that, Jenkins almost comes up with another interception of Lindley, and it gets overturned. But Lindley was a guy that couldn't make any NFL roster this year. He couldn't beat out a rookie fourth-round prospect, Logan Thomas. He was on a practice squad. Nobody wanted him on their 53. They signed him when Carson Palmer looked like he might ever, it was beginning to wonder if he'll ever throw a football again. Now he's starting. And there's nothing that we've seen that says, oh boy, yeah, he's going to set the world on now. The Seattle defense has been fantastic, dominant, looking like that championship defense of a season ago. The Cardinals are, they don't have an answer for Russell Wilson. What other reasons do we have to say there's no way the Cardinals can win this game?
I think you started with the right points of, Ryan Lindley and what he can't do. And what he can't do is be asked to throw the football maybe more than 25 times, maybe. And we're talking in, a set of probably 60 plays, 25 passes. That even seems like a lot, doesn't it? But I think that's the first thing. You can't win this game if you're asking Ryan Lindley to win it for you. And by asking Ryan Lindley to throw the ball around the field, well, you're asking him to win it for you. So, Bruce Arians can drop great quotes all day about we're just going to let him sling it. But, Bruce is a very intelligent man, and I don't think that that's probably going to happen. But, I've been surprised before, so who knows. The other reason is that they can't win this game is because they can't make mistakes. And like you said, the difference between Seattle and St. Louis and the difference between Arizona this year and Arizona last year is when Arizona has a chance to make a play on the ball now, they're making a play on the ball, on defense, I should say. So they force turnovers, they create turnovers, they do those things. Seattle, if Ryan Lindley throws a couple of those passes that were almost interceptions against St. Louis, well, against Seattle, they're going to be interceptions. So, the Cardinals can't make mistakes, and we saw it in the first game. Drew Stanton made mistakes, and that really just shut the door on the game. It wasn't anything other than that. And now it's, the same thing, and you're asking a lesser quarterback to not make any mistakes against maybe the best defense in football.
And yeah, it comes down to the execution. Cardinals did be on a couple of years. 2010, the Cardinals got some miracle moxie work when they managed to defeat the New Orleans Saints. Champs, they beat them at home with Max Hall at quarterback, but Max Hall didn't do anything. It was a couple of return touchdowns where Levi Brown had a touchdown after Max was scrambling and he got hit and he got fumbled the ball, and so it basically, because it's going to take luck, and you can't rely on luck against the defending champs. But hear me for a second, because here's what it kind of, there's this feeling that I can't shake, and this is about the other one. Well, another reason, Seattle's defense is fantastic. Yes, they lost Bobby Wagner back. That defense is playing at a completely different level. They won't be able to throw. They were not going to be able to run. I mean, they couldn't run again. If you look at it logically, they were not able to run the ball against Seattle with their top running back. What makes you think that the guys off the practice squad are going to be able to run? But I'm going to turn it up. So why the Cardinals can win? We're going to start with reason number one. They're at home. They can win at home. They can, because that's what they do. They win at home. Inexplicably, they come up with plays and they win at home. Two, the Ryan Lindley we know isn't the Ryan Lindley that's going to play on Sunday. And that's me. I think that's going to be the hardest thing for Cardinals fans to realize. The Ryan Lindley Cardinals fans have seen was a rookie behind an atrocious offensive line, in an offense that was doing nothing. Really, there wasn't a lot of talent on offense, and a team had given up. And he was a late-round rookie. I think that's the biggest issue people have with Ryan Lindley, is because they think Ryan Lindley, they go back to 2012. He's been in the league now. This is for 2 years later. He's been in the Arian system. We heard nothing but great things about Ryan Lindley. Now, we didn't see much from the preseason, but I'm going to set the thing aside. That Ryan Lindley isn't the same quarterback he was. He can't be. He wouldn't be in the league still, because he was historically bad. So there was some talent there. Arians will leave enough to keep him in last year. They brought him back this year after they really didn't want to leave him, let him go. So if we can hold judgment and forget 2012, let's see what this kid has, because we wouldn't be thinking the end of the world even if this were Logan Thomas playing, and we've even seen Logan Thomas play in a game. Now, there's some fans who jump off the wagon right away. Oh, the season's over if Logan Thomas has played. But Ryan Lindley is a different quarterback. I think he has the talent to be able to do it. He's smart enough to do it. The fact of the matter is whether he can execute that. Reason number three for me, I think the Cardinals can do it. And that's their new running game. No, the Cardinals weren't able to run against Seattle, but let's take a look at the first half of that Seattle-San Francisco game. And as I was watching that game, I thought, oh my gosh, you can run on Seattle. Then here's the numbers of the first half. Now, granted, we have to take into consideration that they kind of shut things down at the end of the game. But in the first half, San Francisco ran the ball 19 times for 104 yards. 19 times for 104 yards. They were getting, now part of that was Kaepernick scrambling. That was Carlos Hyde, gashing the defense. But Frank Gore, but then they lost Gore to concussion. They lost Carlos Hyde. So they're left with Alphonso Smith. And Cardinals fans, we know about Alphonso Smith. Not the guy you want to rely on when it comes to running the ball. Absolutely. But to see San Francisco, when they had the success in the first half against them, was, hey, look, they can run the ball. And the Cardinals now have their offensive line is playing better. They have running backs who can run between the tackles, between Williams and Taylor. You can run the ball. And if you can run the ball in Seattle, even if you don't have to be great at it, because that's what the Cardinals did last year in Seattle. They ran the ball, they ran the ball, they ran the ball, they ran the ball, they ran the ball. And then they made, even if they would turn the ball over, they made just a couple of plays. And that's why I think that the Cardinals can win this game. It's uncanny. I'm normally kind of a homer. I am. But I've got a healthy dose of skepticism, and I didn't think there was a chance that the Cardinals were going to beat the Rams. I can't convince myself, even though I know in my head, there's no way the Cardinals can. I can't shake the feeling. I can't get the feeling away. Say they're going to do this. Plus they keep proving everyone wrong. So why would I go against them now?
I think the first reason you look at, and you talked about being at home, they're a different team. They are a different team, and their defense is even better. And while they had their best defensive performance on the road, on Thursday night against a Rams team that was smoking hot on offense, they're I think it's 6-7 points a game better at home. They allow less yards. They allow less yards in the air. They allow less yards on the ground. They create more turnovers. Just everything's better at home. So that first point is, important. The second point is interesting. Ryan Lindley is who Ryan Lindley is at this point. And the fact is, he's a guy that he can make throws into windows because he has a big arm, but he can't make throws consistently into small windows against a pass rush and against especially an elite secondary. So that'll be interesting. I don't think he can be as bad as he was in 2012, but if he's not better, then you could be in trouble. But I think your third point is kind of the most important, and it's the fact that, one, you can run on Seattle's defense, but two, the Cardinals have shown that they can run the ball. So when you look at this game, it really comes down to Kerwin Williams and Bruce Arians. And if Bruce Arians wants to flip his script that he normally has, and he runs the ball, 36 times and throws the ball 25 times, then I think you're seeing a ball control offense where he's not going to let Ryan Lindley throw him out of a football game. So I think that's where you kind of look at it in that sense. And honestly, I'm considered a pessimist and whatnot, but I thought they had a chance, and I wrote about it. I thought they had a chance against St. Louis, and I think they really have a chance in this game not because of any extracurricular stuff or the fact that the football gods are on their side or anything like that. I just think they're a good football team, and as long as they keep the game close, they have the ability to win close games. And again, as long as they're not relying on Ryan Lindley to throw them to a victory. We're talking about a guy that's never thrown a touchdown pass in the NFL.
Just ignore that. That's not the same guy. It's basically a guy that's never played. I'm throwing 2012 out the window because it doesn't count. 2012 is just, we're looking at a brand new quarterback who came into the game last week who only had scout team. So the only time he had in practice was running the Rams offense. So that's all he was doing. So I'm throwing 2012 out the window. And I'm thinking because I've seen the talent. There's a few throws. So he's made 3 or 4 throws in his short career that are breathtaking. That back shoulder throw that to the sideline that John Brown had, but he got caught all the month. That was beautiful. In 2012, which I said just throw away, but he had so I'm going to bring it back for just a moment. When he was in Atlanta, that fourth down play on the throw down to the sideline to Larry Fitzgerald, that's a catch Fitz normally makes. That was a thing of beauty. You won't find 5 other quarterbacks who can consistently make that throw. So there's a little bit to Ryan Lindley. You say, oh my gosh, that's NFL arm talent. There's the ability to make those throws. And so I think the key is now, can he keep his feet set under him? He knows the offense. He knows how to protect himself, as Arian said, but he's not playing behind that 2012 line, but he's playing that behind the 2014 line. If he can get his feet set, I think we're going to see some pretty throws.
Yeah, and we'll see. And I think that's what you have to look at from a positive perspective, is it's a new and different Ryan Lindley, hopefully. And that's the thing. So if he's as bad as he was in 2012, and if he's as inconsistent as he was in the first half against or not the first half, but in his half of play against the Rams, I mean, he only threw the ball 10 times, right? I think
4 of 10. 4 of 10.
Yeah.
With one drop and one that almost was a catch.
Yeah, and then but he also had the almost.
Yes, the almost interception.
Should have been an interception. So I mean, it's just one of those things. You have to see him consistently. He can't go 8 for 20, so to speak. You can't see him go 8 for 20 in this game, and then expect it to be, oh look, he's the answer for the next 3 weeks. If he's 8 for 20 with 3 near picks and a couple drops, then there's still a problem. But I think the fact that he has a running game he can rely on, because remember in that 2012, you and I could have probably done a better job running the football than what they were getting at the time. And I don't say this often because the NFL players and what they go through is just so much, so much of a grind and so much that, most of us can never imagine having to deal with. But that end of the season in 2012, that team and the players and the way they were playing was garbage. And, obviously it wasn't about talent, it was about determination. And so you have a different team. You have a team that's basically a complete 180 from that team in 2012. You have a team that believes they should win games, not a team that believes that Ken Wisenhunt needs to be fired. And that's what the difference is. So you look at a team that says, oh, well, Andre Johnson's hurt, no big deal. We're just going to hand the ball to this guy out of Utah State with funny hair and that likes peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and he's going to run for, he's going to average 85 yards a game and 6 yards a carry, because that's just, he's that good. Nobody, no team does that, but that's what this Cardinals team believes. And so that's important, I think, at least, in this game, because you're going up against probably maybe the best team in football. Maybe. I don't know. They've been really good lately. So you go up against maybe the best team in football, and, you have to have that confidence that you not just belong on the field with them, but that you are better than them and you will beat them. And I think that this team, right or wrong, has that confidence, and I think it's right. And I think that, this week they'll show that.
And like I've said about Drew Stanton, and I've made the I've made the connection between 2012 and 2014. I've made it a lot this season, probably more than anyone wanted to hear. I've connected the dots that Drew Stanton is like Kevin Cobb. And guess what? It kind of ended the same. Kevin Cobb got hurt and Drew Stanton got hurt.
Well, and they both had an injury history too, like a injury filled history. I mean, that was part of the reason Drew Stanton was never a starting quarterback. Not just because he kept getting stuck behind number one picks. He got injured every season. Like literally every season he played in, he got injured. So he's injury prone. I mean, he just is. And that's not a shot at the guy. You feel bad, but much like Carson Palmer, after the Chemo von Olaf, whatever the guy's name is, hit to the knee, Carson Palmer's had an injury-plagued career after that.
Yeah.
I think last year was really the only season he played all 16, and now, he's injured again. And it's one of those things. Injury proneness isn't necessarily a thing that you can kind of count on to happen, but when it happens, it seems to just always happen all at once, and the Cardinals are facing that reality this year.
Well, and the connection I was trying to make is, if we look at how the Cardinals have been winning games this season, and you look at how they won games in both 2011 and 2012 with Kevin Cobb, they weren't getting elite quarterback play. They were getting great defensive play, and the games where Kevin Cobb played well enough, okay, with Drew Stanton, the key is this: complete over 50% of your passes, throw more touchdowns than interceptions, and continue to get that great defensive play. And you know what happens when the Cardinals do that? If they get 55% of the passes completed, 55, over 50%, they get more touchdowns than interceptions, and they get a solid defensive performance, they win. So we don't need Ryan Lindley to be Carson Palmer, we just need them to approach Drew Stanton's numbers. Complete over 50% of his passes. Go.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you got an 11 for 19 for 125 yards and no touchdowns and no interceptions, I will say they win that game. I really would. And those are terrible quarterback numbers. But I think that's a win for the Cardinals, because you just made the biggest point. As long as they don't turn the ball over, and what happened in Seattle, they turned the ball over. If they don't turn the ball over, they should win the game. And that's what it comes down to. I don't want to say shocked, but I would be more upset if they lost the game and they didn't turn the ball over and Ryan Lindley played well, than if Ryan Lindley was the dumpster fire that he was 3 or 2 years ago, and they lost the game in a blowout fashion. And that's the honest to goodness truth. Like, I can be okay with the fact that they're on their third string quarterback and they're playing the team that's playing like one of the best, if not the best in the league, and they get blown out. But if Lindley plays well and they lose that game, then I'm going to be like, okay, what just happened? Because in theory, and you nailed it, they don't need him to win the game for them. They just need him to keep them in the game, because they have so much talent everywhere else that all that other talent can come, rise to the occasion and win the game. And so if that happens, that would be, like I said, more upsetting for me than if, he's just a complete dumpster fire and they just lose.
So we've kind of made the case for both. And I think more and more, it seems the more and more we talk about this game, the more and more I think about this game, the more and more we're psyching each other into the idea the Cardinals are going to win this game just to keep this magical season going. Which tells me to this: they need home field. I don't know if Drew Stanton's going to be ready for the wild card weekend, but could you imagine riding Ryan Lindley on the road in New Orleans. That's scary. Even though the Saints have been really kind of inconsistently terrible this year, even at home. Just think about that. Ryan Lindley on the road in a playoff game. So you've got Drew Brees, you've got the Superdome, and you've got a third string, fourth string quarterback. Did you give the Cardinals any hope at all? I wouldn't at all.
No,
at all.
And the reason why for me is more what we talked about earlier in the show. Drew Brees is having a down season, and I think that all of us would have given up our firstborn to have Carson Palmer put up the same numbers that
Yes.
Drew Brees is having in a down season. I mean, you look at it and it's just So that's the formula to beat the Cardinals is a Drew Brees led team.
Now Carolina, Atlanta. I could see it. I could see them winning, but I don't think it. I think it's going to end up being New Orleans. They got the pedigree for that. They've got the history. So I think it's going to be New Orleans that wins that division. And so you're looking at either resting a week, getting potentially Stanton back to play a team at home, or going on the road with Ryan Lindley in the Superdome against Drew Brees.
Yeah, and I think if you look forward, so let's just say that they win this weekend, which I think, I don't know why, I think that they will. And that's probably a bad omen right there. But if you look forward past that, and they're the 1 seed, that means they'll likely get Green Bay or New Orleans in round 2. Because I think it's going to be, you could maybe end up with Detroit as the 5 seed as well. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with all of that. But, so you could end up with, I shouldn't say that. You could end up with Seattle as the 5 seed too, which would just suck. But, you're going to end up with a combination of New Orleans, Green Bay, Seattle, and Detroit as your first round opponent or your first game opponent if you find a way to win this week. And I think outside of Detroit, even Seattle, even when, after they win this week in Seattle, I think every Cardinals fan would feel better about playing any other team than maybe Green Bay at home than Seattle. So you look at it and how important it is, to win this game, because if you do have to face Seattle again, you want them at home. You don't want to have to face Seattle on the road if you find a way to win in New Orleans or Atlanta or, hopefully Carolina, if that's what ends up happening to the Cardinals. So I think this weekend, that's why I think this weekend, that combined with Sunday Night Football, that's why this weekend is being billed as the biggest regular season game ever. Because it really will define the season in terms of success, because I think if they lose this game, then we're pretty much, even a diehard is pretty much going to reserve that it was a great fight to get to where they were, 12-4 or 11-5, whatever they finish if they lose this week. But it's going to be really, really hard to expect them to go on the road in the first round of playoffs with Ryan Lindley as their quarterback and win a game, like you said earlier.
And
but go ahead.
I was just going to ask. So, in the end, would this amazing season, and I know there's a lot of optimism for 2015. There really is. Get back a lot of these healthy players, get these injured players, get them healthy. But you can never count on next year. That's the thing that we learned from this year. There was a lot of optimism coming to this year. You can't count on next year. And you look at the talent and the level of play they had in 2014. If they end up at a one and done in the wild card team just because they ended up losing their backup quarterback. Because even with Drew Stanton, people believed, myself included. Drew Stanton is good enough to make a play, good enough to lead a very good defensive team with some home field advantage through the playoffs. He's good enough to do that. Makes me feel this is going to be another wasted magical season. We've seen it with the Diamondbacks. We saw in 2011, things kind of fizzled. They looked great. And you had these anytime, anyone, anytime. They just won games and then it just fizzled. How many times have we seen the Phoenix Suns, where they had lightning the ball with Steve Nash? They can't get past the Spurs. Back to the KJ Barkley years, they couldn't get past the Rockets. And it ends up being, will this end up being, and this is even worse because they just do it through attrition. Is it a wasted season? I mean, yes, the ride was fun, but when you look at the results, was it just another wasted season as a Cardinals fan?
And I think what you just said is the other reason why it's the biggest game, they've regular season game they've had, because again, you want to validate and legitimize this season. And I think if you lose this game on Sunday, you kind of just fall into that reserve of, well, they fought the good fight, they worked hard, but it was just too much to overcome. Whereas if you win and you beat, again, probably one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL, then you're saying, okay, we still got a chance, and we get Drew Stanton back, so we have an even better chance. Oh, by the way, and we play at home in the playoffs. So, yeah, I think, you don't want to feel that way. You don't want to feel like there's a wasted season or anything.
Then it was a missed opportunity. Last year,
yep,
they left games, and this year they're not really leaving games on the field, but with the injuries, but so it feels like you missed out. Like it wasn't. Obviously there was disappointment of some of the bad seasons, but you never really ended those seasons thinking, what if? They were just bad. This is one of those seasons you go, what if? And if they can't pull this off on Sunday, it'll end up being one of those what if stories that the Suns had 2 or 3 times, the one that the Diamondbacks had in 2011. And for Arizona sports fans, it would just be another of a long list of just disappointments, and not it's almost the worst kind of disappointment because you were right on the cusp.
Well, and it's the uncontrollable type. Even the Darryl Washington thing, you can kind of, all right, whatever, we can recover from this, but all the on-field injuries is different, and it makes it harder. So. Yeah, I mean, a lost season, and we see in San Francisco it can turn on a dime, too. I mean, you're talking about a one single throw away from being in the Super Bowl versus now it looks like Harbaugh's gone, and, they even finish with a winning record? And, I mean, that's a dumpster fire. And
yeah, we even saw it at a much smaller scale when in 2012. I mean, they were 4-0. I was in that press room and the press interview room and in that locker room when they were talking about just how special that team was and their ability to win games, just like this team, just like this year's team, and then it just and it happened like that.
Yeah, and so I think that's why you can make the case that it's the most important regular season game ever.
Well, that'll about wrap it up tonight. Arizona Cardinals fans, we talked the biggest game the Arizona Cardinals has ever played in the regular season. University of Phoenix Stadium, Sunday night football against the Seattle Seahawks. It's a big one, guys. We've made the case why they can win it, why they can't, why they have to win it. Keep the conversation going at Revenge of the Birds. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thank you for listening. Of course, if you're listening live, I'll thank you as always. If you're listening via download, you know where to find us. Subscribe to the show on iTunes or on Stitcher Radio so you never miss another episode. Follow us on Twitter. Seth, thanks for coming on tonight. Have a wonderful night.
Have a good one, Jess. Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to Revenge of the Birds. Keep the conversation going by visiting revengeofthebirds.com. Follow us on Twitter at Revenge of Birds. You can also find us on iTunes at facebook.com/Revenge of the Birds.